Joining us live now, the former Pentagon advisor and commander of the US Navy Reserve, Jason Israel. Talk about the Quad. What do you make? It's very brief, not for very long, these Quad meetings taking place, Jason. What have you made? What are your observations?
Thanks for having me, Pete. Let me tell you, as somebody who's been a White House and Pentagon staffer, if you look at the readout of the list of the things that were announced, not necessarily in the headlines, these are the things that make staffers to the president very happy, because you see a lot of proactive initiatives of things that are going to be happening between the meetings. And there's two things that are genius, I think, about the Quad, Pete. One is, first of all, it's really showing a U.S. and allies focus on the Indo-Pacific. So from the U.S. perspective, we're getting together democracies and close allies to talk about the Indo-Pacific. The second is, if you look at that list, it doesn't directly talk about China at all. But if you look at each one of the points, and let me just bring up a couple, they announced a huge maritime domain awareness project. That's going to allow understanding of climate change, of disaster response, but it's also going to allow for understanding of illegal fishing in the area, of course, which China has been very active in the region. So being able to provide sort of proactive vision for the region with lots of different programs in between the meetings is even more important than the meetings themselves. Does it lead to action, though? So absolutely. So for each one of these, let me look at, for example, climate. You think, well, is climate just about targets when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions? What they also announced was the 4 transportation ministers for the 4 countries are going to meet, and they're going to discuss how they can create a network of green shipping across the Indo-Pacific. The energy ministers are going to meet and going to put a Quad 10-year action plan for creating clean tech together as a country. So what you're doing is you're getting countries together to actually look at the science and tech going forward too. They even announced a 100 Quad fellowships and students that are graduating this year in Australia should look at this. The application is live for 100 graduate students to go to the U.S. and study STEM fields under a Quad fellowship, fully paid for. And applications are open until 30 June. So they're really trying to get the Quad to be even more of a solid structure than it has been just through this long list of programs.
Right. Joe Biden, as you would be aware, he said he would respond militarily if China were to attack Taiwan, and then the White House walked that back to say strategic ambiguity still exists, and then that was backed up by Joe Biden yesterday. So was it a slip of the tongue by Biden, or was it something else, maybe something purposely sinister?
Yes, unfortunately, I'm not behind the scenes anymore, Pete, to say whether it was a slip of the tongue. But I will say that the way that it has gone back and forth a little bit on what the actual response would be, to me, that is the definition of strategic ambiguity. So you're not going to make a statement that says, well, it's our intention to be strategically ambiguous about that. A president's not going to say that. But if a president says one thing and then says, well, in context, what I really meant was this, then that does offer that strategic ambiguity. Unfortunately, it also opens him up to very legitimate criticism that we're not stating a very clear policy. And of course, in the meantime, the ire of China's comments is going to just increase.
Well, I mean, he's going to get criticism either way, isn't he, Jason? Because if the question was asked, would you respond militarily if China were to invade Taiwan, and then Biden says no, well, China would then just go, okay, sounds good. So he had to say yes, right?
Well, he did have to say yes in a way, but remember, there's lots of different ways that they communicate. So myself, I mentioned I'm an officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve, though I'm here on a personal capacity, so these views are on my own, is there are so many military exercises in the region, as you know, and a lot of that communicates as well. What the Indo-Pacific Command does through its regular communication, through its military exercises, through its foreign military sales, through its own military technology development, that communicates much more to China about what the U.S. intentions would be. And also remember, billions in foreign military sales directly to Taiwan, right, that the U.S. sells. So that communicates more to China than just what the president says in an offhand comment.
How does a new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, change things, if at all? I mean, of course, he wants increased climate targets, but beyond that, whether it's defence or what have you, our relationship between the U.S., does anything change at all?
Well, I usually downplay personal relationships when it comes to these international agreements, and they do only go so far. But it is the opportunity for a reset. And the fact that the timing worked out such that, if you noticed in the opening remarks from the leaders at the Quad, everybody acknowledged Prime Minister Albanese as coming straight from an election win and welcoming him and congratulating him and thanking him for showing how much of a priority the Quad was by immediately going to that. So that does have not just symbolic value, but when it also comes to some of the other commitments, does offer a reset. And stating that, like, for example, for climate, which a lot of analysts say, I'm not a domestic political expert, would say that Prime Minister Albanese has more of a mandate to look at some of the climate action. That is a significant portion of the Quad piece. So that could actually translate to more action within the Quad.